Well, can you tell me about Chinese social media and how it's different than American social media?
Yeah. Now, the Chinese social media, there are censorship, yes, definitively. But a little bit like the US is that different platforms have their own censorship rules. And their rule is based on what they believe the government too sensitive for a certain issue, the government will be having trouble. So like my content, some of them, most of them are okay, but some of them will have problem with maybe one platform, but not the other. So it's a little bit like here, it all depends on the platform. But there are a few things like Xi Jinping's name, normally you don't bring that up. So in China, there is a thing like they don't want to overly emphasize people. You are free to talk about policies. So you can criticize different policies. That's fine, but they don't want to be obsessed, highly critical of a particular person.
Okay.
And for that, yeah, so for that reason, like a leader's name is kind of sensitive. But people get around it on the internet. We call him Dada. We use some different name. And the same thing with Putin, with Biden, they all have their nickname kind of online, and Donald Trump, simply because, I mean, maybe you say Trump, there won't be any problem. But since you have other name, and it's kind of, you can have fun with their names, like Joe Biden is Sleepy Joe, there's a Chinese version of that kind of thing. So you just kind of avoid those kind of things, right? So in general, that's the rule. Don't overly emphasize or critical of a particular person, but you can talk about politics. You can talk about policies. In fact, I think the party they will actually look online to see how people feel about particular issues, and they will adjust their policies accordingly. Which actually, think about it, is actually pretty democratic.
Yeah.
Even though you don't have election, but the election just happens every 2 years, every 3 years. It's just 5 minutes, it's done. Whether they're going to do the things according to people's will, they don't, and you don't know, right? And whereas here, the party constantly checking, okay, here is the sentiment, and sometimes they will even throw out different issues just to let people discuss to see where people are.
Yeah.
And in particular, there are two, sessions, and when they have meetings, during that meeting and before that meeting, there will be a lot of discussions for different policies, etc. And to the degree they even let people sometimes vote on online vote on certain legislation proposals. And so you can vote. I mean, it's not binding, but they will get a sense of, okay, on this particular issue where people are. And based on that, and then a whole bunch of other studies and this and that, then you can just then the meeting will discuss that, etc., and go forward from there. So actually, I think even though there's no general, there are low level, like village level elections, but there is no general election. But I think there's still a lot of democratic process going on. That's how I feel. In terms of parties, yes, the Communist Party is the party for ruling, but there are other parties. There are many other parties get together with their own session every year. And during that is called a consultative party. Conference. So in that conference, different parties will bring out the issues that they want to discuss, they want to address. And then that will gather together, also giving to the People's Congress. And then the People's Congress will go from there. So you see, they are doing a lot of different ways to collect people's feedback, through different other parties and through online feedbacks from, they also have focus groups, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot of those things going on, polling, et cetera. So I really don't think China is authoritarian or dictatorship the traditional way, even though it's have no election. And then the social media is a big part of that, because there are different social medias, and those 6 platforms, they have a little bit of emphasis. Some of them you can have a little bit longer, more in-depth analysis, like 20, 30 seconds, the minutes kind of a video. Others, you have shorter video, just like TikTok, the kind of video. There's Douyin, which is the TikTok version of Chinese TikTok. Those are a little bit shorter videos, et cetera. So they even have their own characteristics as well in terms of platforms. And then again, if the content gets censored or not, depends a little bit on the platform, whether they are particularly sensitive for one thing or another. They pay maybe extra attention for one kind of things. So I would say in general, it is censored, but I can have certain understanding of why it's got censored. Just look at this US mainstream media, right? The media control the narrative and working with the government, and yet you call it free speech. Well, in China, it's like, first of all, China do need to protect its airwaves from the West because there's constantly attack from the West trying to influence the Chinese public opinion, etc. That's something I think the Chinese government in particular is sensitive. And now more and more people actually don't like BBC, they don't like CNN. They think there's just too much lying going on. So in that sense, you simply have to control the media. If you don't want other countries' interference into your media. So even from that perspective, the government has to kind of get more in control. But then, of course, within China, they also don't want 1.4 billion people is a lot of people. They don't want any wrong information got there, and then people up in arms started protesting without even knowing what's going on. That can easily happen. So for those reasons, I guess, in general, I would like to see a little bit more loosened than what they're doing now, but I have understanding of why they're doing it. So that's yeah, every country has their own problem and there's always room for improvement. So I mean, China is still figuring things out, right? Mm-hmm. The Chinese character, like you said, the same thing with the social media, with the freedom of speech kind of thing. China's trying to figure that out. Yeah. But I have to say, I don't want to see US style freedom of speech when the media is very much controlled by a big corporation. I don't want to see that. I just read that 75% of the advertisement dollars coming from pharmaceutical companies. And part of the reason Tucker Carlson was fired is because he had a piece not that long ago, very skeptical about the vaccine, those kind of thing, which apparently upset a lot of big pharma. Yeah. And that's, one of the many things that affected this decision. So I mean, that kind of a control media, I'm not sure. I don't think I want China to have that, So if you have a total free market, that will happen. There will be some big corporations in control of the media, and then they got together and, you never know. It can quickly turn to something hard to control, Yeah.
Well, as long as there is inequality in society, some people are going to have more power than others. Yeah. And so I guess the question is, who do you want to have that power? Do you want it to be de facto, just those who happen to have the most money? Or do you want it to be a strategic decision for the interests of the country? And it seems like in China, you have the Communist Party, that represents 90 million people, 90 million members, strategically deciding this is what we want to highlight for the overall interest of the country. Whereas in the United States, it's left randomly up to whoever just happens to have the most money.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I really appreciated the opportunity to chat with you. Is there anything further we should discuss?
I just want to ask you, do you have some last word for the Chinese audience? My audience also have overseas Chinese speaking people as well. So any last words?
Well, I travel. I have not been to China, but I have been to a number of countries around the world that the USA attacks. And the USA is very good at presenting itself as just this amazing, prosperous country. It's just that there's nothing but iPods and iPhones, and people just go drink and party all day long. And it's just this happy Disneyland paradise. But when you see America on TV, 90% of the time, you're only seeing Southern California or New York City. But this country is so much bigger than that. And there are all kinds of sections of U.S. society that never get heard, that don't fit the image that is crafted of the United States by our leaders. Our leaders work really, really hard with American movies, et cetera, to present this image of the USA as just this perfect country with no problems, where everyone is wealthy and everyone's happy. And that's just a false image. And I know your audience probably knows that already, but I just want to really reiterate that. And I also want to reiterate that that when the United States tries to destabilize a country, they lie and they make false promises. Libya used to have the most prosperous economy, the highest life expectancy on the African continent. And many of the Libyans who went out to protest Gaddafi, they thought that they would be able to continue to have that prosperous lifestyle. They would just have more freedom. But what did they get? Now Libya has been bombed and destroyed. They have open air slave markets. Parts of the country don't even have electricity anymore. They were tricked. And that's how the social media color revolution apparatus works. It lies and it tricks people. And it often plays on real frustrations that people have. In every country in the world, there are things that are not fair. There are double standards, etc. But they attach to those things. And they play on these delusions people have about the United States. And they play on these delusions. And then they use it to try and destroy countries, right? And every single country that's ever had one of these color revolutions is worse off. The fall of the Soviet Union was an economic disaster. What's happened to Libya, what's happened to Iraq, what's happened to Afghanistan, no country benefits from having the United States destabilize them. And that's what I really wish people could understand, because I've been to Iran a number of times. There's a lot of young Iranians who are just really involved with Twitter and Facebook, and they have this delusion about the United States, and they have this belief that somehow if Iran were to get closer to the United States, if the Islamic Republic were overthrown, Iran would just get to be more like the United States and be more prosperous. And we know that that's not what would happen, right? And so I really, as an American, would urge people to really not let themselves fall for the strategic propaganda that the American government has. And that also at the time of the fall of the Soviet Union, many of the young people that were angry at the Soviet government, they had real grievances, and they didn't realize they were marching for capitalism. They thought they were marching for democratic socialism or socialism with the human face. But look what happened. They were manipulated. And, and I know that there are probably big disagreements within Chinese society right now. There are probably things in Chinese society that need to be adjusted, et cetera. But I would urge you to be very careful not to let yourself be manipulated, because there are very evil people. And, if they will destroy America, their own country, I mean, our country is falling apart. Imagine what they would do to China if they got the chance. We are battling against a satanic elite, a group of people that are only concerned about making profits. And they are trying to make the world poorer and keep the world poor so that they can stay at the top. And they are desperate to stay at the top of the pyramid. And they will do all kinds of evil things to secure their power. And they're basically destroying. America used to be one of the most prosperous countries in the world, and now it's falling apart. And they've destroyed so many countries around the world. So my advice, at risk of sounding condescending, would be, please don't let yourself be manipulated by the very sophisticated maneuvers and manipulations of American propaganda.
Okay, sounds good.